Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of Black creatives, changing the world one story at a time. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with some amazing Black writers and creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that we think and write about. The guests on this podcast are writers of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, music, plays, and so much more, as well as creative guests whose work is all around writing joyful narratives on history's pages. So if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. I really hope that you're enjoying the season so far, and I would love it if you would leave a rating and a review in your podcast app, as this will help others find the podcast. I'd also love for you to subscribe and share your favorite episode with a friend. Also, please join the mailing list. You'll find a link in the show notes and over on the website, www.writingblackjoy.com. I have some giveaways that are only available to folks who are on the mailing list or following me over on Instagram at Writing Black Joy, including books by some of the season's guests, Writing Black Joy card decks, and more. So definitely get on that mailing list and follow me over on Instagram. Let's move on to today's guest, Danielle Boone. Now, Danielle believes that with resilience, anyone can rise above their circumstances and that everyone has a story worth sharing. Growing up, Danielle earned the nickname Hummingbird for her small size and constant motion, qualities that helped her pivot through life's unexpected challenges. After years of enduring personal loss, she chose to grow stronger from her experiences, collecting lessons that now guide her work. As a writer, creative producer, and a restorative coach, her mission is to help clients rediscover their inner strength and find the courage to tell their story. Through personalized coaching and storytelling, she empowers those who have experienced loss to view challenges with a fresh perspective and move forward with confidence. Danielle and I discussed her writing journey and evolving from journalism to more creative storytelling, how her view of her own story shifted as she came to appreciate the power of storytelling, how she realized her own grief was blocking her creativity, how her book evolved as a story of moving through experiences in her life and the lessons she learned, what she learned in the absence of so much of what we strive for, her coaching process called the boardroom, understanding how sharing her story helps people to see the value in their own story, how Shonda Rhimes inspired her to say yes, and how she works with clients to find lessons from their loss to create legacy, and so much more. You can head over to Danielle's website and follow her over on LinkedIn to stay up to date with all that she is putting out into the world. I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. And today I have with me the lovely Danielle, who has described herself as a wordplayologist, which I'm not going to lie to you, Danielle, like that spoke to me when I saw that. I was like, this is going to be a good conversation. I am so pleased to have you here. As somebody who is a lover of language and wordplay, tell me what brought you to describe yourself as a wordplayologist?
Well, so I have been writing since I was about 4 years old. That was my way of communicating. Like, I was relatively quiet as a child. And so, but I could express myself through the written word. So I would journal, I would write stories. If, even with my parents, sometime when I had to express my feelings, I I would write a letter because I would get it all out, that way. And so I would also like play around with words. Me and my brother would kind of play around. He was into music and things like that. And so I would write poetry and I would like play around with words, and he's like, that's not a real word. I'm like, but I like it. It sounds like a real word, not that I would use it grammatically, like if I was writing a professional paper, but it was like, hey, I like that. And so as I got older, people were like, you always play with words. And then I would be like, oh, wordplay, wordplay. And when I got even older and looking at like a business or coaching people or whatever, people were like, oh, you're like a word, you like, I don't know, like you're engineer of words. And so it just came to me, it's like wordplayologist. I was like, I like that. And I would use it for fun. But now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start using it. And it's an attention grabber. So people are like, what is that?
I love it. And I tell you what I tell anybody who asks me, all words are made up. Okay. There are words that exist now that didn't exist 20 years ago. All words are made up. So you do your thing, girl. Bring your word. Bring your word. I have no objection to that whatsoever. The other thing, and you sort of, kind of alluded to it just now, is talking about growing up. You were quiet, relatively quiet, and you used paper and pencil as a way to express your feelings. You spent hours jotting down your thoughts, pouring your soul onto the page through journaling, poetry, and short stories. But writing was only the beginning. So, of course, as you said, you started off using it mostly as a way to communicate, and also as a way to have fun. With your poetry. And by the way, I tell people I'm an occasional poet. I don't write poetry very often. And sometimes I was saying to a guest yesterday, so I don't know if the episode will come up before this one, but I was like, sometimes poetry is one of the few times that exactly as a thing sounds in my head is exactly as it comes out onto the paper. It almost like comes out like a tap, like onto the paper. So I love poetry for that. But tell me a bit about your own writing journey. You started with the fun and the play and the communication. I know now you've written a book, you have your business and stuff like that. So tell us give us a little flavor of what happened in between there.
Oh, wow. Okay. So as I stated, like when I was younger, I would write just to communicate. And then I found out that I love writing. I love stories. I love talking to people and listening to their stories. So fast forward a little bit. I've always been like a creative writer. I don't figure like I'm a technical writer. I love the creative writing. So throughout elementary school and high school, I was like, hey, I'm writing poetry. I'm writing short stories. And so during that time, I was like, what am I going to go to college for? And the general thing for writing was journalism. And I was like, okay, I started off in journalism because that's what writers do. Unless, I was an English major in high school, then of course you go to journalism. And I was like, okay, because I'm more creative. When I got there, wrote for the paper at two of my colleges. I went to several colleges, but I was on the staff writing for a paper. And then I realized I didn't really like news. I was like, I like the story aspect, but I was like, this isn't the type of writing I wanted to do. So I have been an advocate of like television, all my life, but I never thought somebody wrote that. Like it never dawned on me, like somebody is writing what they're saying until I came up, I found out a radio television broadcast program in my junior college. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I transferred from journalism communications to like broadcast communications and to radio television. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So we had to write ads and things like that. And it was cool. But then when I transferred again, and I was like, they had a program that was focused on television. And I said, I like this. Script writing is my thing. Like I tried to write a play before, stage plays, not so much, but visual, like on television, that type of writing, it spoke to me. So I ended up moving towards that. And I got my degree in television writing and producing. And I was like, cause I worked in sales, like my first job was in sales. And so I worked in sales for years, and understanding the producing part is taking the creative story and then selling it. I was like, oh, I can kind of do these things together. Didn't move into it that much. Once I graduated, I did work for my church back in Chicago. I worked in the television department, and I was able to produce like our daily show. And then we had like a news segment, which was kind of cool because it was more creative than just telling information. So I was able to work that. Um, and that was like the progression. So I wanted to move over into film because I love film. I love watching films. I love the stories. I look at it and I see story. Even when I was working retail, it was all story. Like I used to say I'm not a salesperson. I don't like salespeople. They try to force things on you. When I worked in clothing retail, people would come in and they're like, "Hey, I'm looking for a skirt." Okay, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's going on? Like, I wanted to know the story behind it. And they appreciated that. They're like, oh, she cares about me. She's just not trying to sell an item. So whenever I talk to people, I'm listening for the story. When I hear something, I'm listening for the story. Even I got a mentor at my old church, and I found out that she was like a stage manager for live production.
Love it.
So I moved into that because I would ask her questions, and she said, well, you want to shadow me? And she would do like major concerts and corporate events and things like that. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So even when I'm watching her, she was like audio and lights and stage and really into like the logistics of the thing. But I liked putting the story together. Like that's what I saw. Yeah. So it's interesting because now that's what I do. Like I've moved, I kind of went away from television. I got our department got restructured back then. And so I started doing more shows with her, and I got moved into like the production side of it. And that's my job now. Like I'm a production coordinator for live events, but I'm looking back into like writing and storytelling because I do have a film in me that I'm looking to push out by next year. So excited about that. So
I'll have to have you back on when that film is out, and we could discuss that. And I love that because I have had a couple of guests on this season who have moved from writing one type of thing to another. And to me, that is the creative aspect. I'm in a writing group called CJ and Write by Javacia Harris-Bowser. She's already been twice a guest on the podcast, so go find her episode. She's awesome. But Javacia, I remember her saying when she started CJ and Write, she wanted a group that was open to anybody who wrote anything. Where she's in Alabama. She was like, there was like romance writers and this and poets. And she was like, what, like, why do we have to stick to this one thing? It sounded like a unique idea to her, but to me, I'm just like, I write whatever I feel like writing. I feel like, like I said, that we're talking about that poem I wrote the other day. I thought it was going to be a blog post. And I was like, no, I think it's going to be a poem, right? Sometimes I have an idea. I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be a fiction as opposed to, nonfiction or whatever. Like, I think that's the creative piece. But the through line is always the story, right? The through line of the poem or the film or the TV or the book or whatever is that we are drawn to other people's stories. So one of the things you talked about earlier, and I know about you as well, is that you do believe in that power of storytelling. Tell us a little bit about your own experience with telling your own story, because I know you've got your book that's out. I'll drop a link in the show notes for people who want to read Danielle's book. But tell us a bit about your own experience with that storytelling.
Wow, that is so interesting because I used to think my story wasn't good enough. And when I say about that, because most stories, there's the trial or the conflict that people are drawn to. And I didn't have the best life growing up, but, being a young Black woman on the west side of Chicago, I didn't have that story that people were used to. I had two parents who loved each other. Me and my brothers got along. Like I had extended family and we did things. And so I was like, well, nobody wants to hear about a girl who really didn't have any problems. And then I minimized my problems because they weren't big enough. And so I was like, I'm here for everyone else. Like I can help anyone else. I can help you with your problems. And, I didn't have like weight problems. I didn't have like insecurities of like, oh, well, no one likes me because I had friends. But I did still have this self-esteem thing where I wasn't good enough. And so because my story wasn't bad enough, I felt like, well, that's not good enough either. I was just average in my own mind. I was like, I was just average. Nobody's really going to listen to me. But I watched other people and I learned how to get out of challenges. So there was the stretch. My book is about a loss and the lessons I've learned through loss. So my dad passed in 2009, 3 weeks after my wedding, heart attack, leaving church. I was like, and we didn't even know if he was sick or not. It just happened. And I was like, okay, I went into the mode of I have to help my mom. I have to help my brothers. You know, my younger brother, my dad was like his best friend, but my mom and my dad, they were that couple that loved each other. They were like connected. So, and my mom was like this strong woman who nothing like fazed her. But when my dad passed, she broke. And I just went into the mode of, all right, I have to help people. Me and my sister, this is what we're going to do. And of course, and I had just got married. So it was like, all right, I'm getting married, but I have to take care of my husband. I have to take care of my mom, I help my brothers, you know, everybody else. And it wasn't until 7 years later when my mom passed that I realized that I had not fully grieved my father. And within that 7 years, several things happened. My mom got breast cancer. I had like 4 or 5 miscarriages. I had to deliver twins that I didn't even know I was having twins. Like my grandmother, like all of these things happened over this 7 years. And it wasn't until my mom passed that I was like able to breathe. And I looked back and I was working on the script for the film with my writing partner. And he was like, Danielle, you're not giving me your full creativity. What's going on? And he said, I don't think you fully grieved. And I was like, what do you mean? I've cried. We had the memorial, like everything. He was like, no, I need you to take 30 days. Do not think of structure. Just write your feelings. He said, because I know you, you're the person that will like, okay, I'm good. Have my moment. Keep going. And so when I did that, I realized that I had went numb for 7 years about all of those things. And so whenever something else came up, I was like, okay, I can handle it. I'll have a moment. All right, but I really hadn't went through the entire process. And I was very private because, you know, to me, even those things were minimal compared to what other people were going through. So I had already had this system of like, oh, my problems aren't that bad.
Yeah. You know, I what I find interesting about that is that I think 2 things. One is that, and you know, part of the reason I started the podcast is because I felt like I didn't see my type of stories out there that reflected my type of life. And I think a part of that is because quite often the stories, particularly this is my experience, I found stories that I saw that featured you know, like a Black girl or a Black woman, they were very traumatic. So I could see why you would think, well, mine can't be that bad because, like, you know, it's pretty average, it's pretty whatever. But to me, that's part of the reason why I feel like I call it everyday storytellers. Like, I feel like people should tell those stories because we learn a lot from hearing, when you call yourself a wordplay, I'll just like call myself a story listener. It's, that's like my term for myself, because I love to listen to people's stories, but also, you know, every good thing I've learned from having a conversation with someone, right? About something that may have been simple. And because it is those everyday things, it is the, you know, the relationships and, you know, becoming a parent or not becoming a parent. I remember when my sister was pregnant early, few years ago, having a conversation with her, that she was like, I didn't realize so many women had miscarriages because people don't talk about it because it's not, but you know what I mean? But I think what happens is that by people kind of minimizing their own story in relation to what they're seeing out there, especially if the narrative that is out there is a certain type of narrative. Yeah. I feel like it has that impact on you. And that's why I think it's important for those stories to be out there, even the normal ones, right? Even the quote unquote normal ones. And especially the ones about the parents who love each other or whatever, because I think that makes you think like, oh, it is actually possible to have a good relationship and whatever, because I think we believe what we see. And if we don't see those things out there, you know, you might think, oh, you know, nobody cares if I had parents that loved each other and I got along with my siblings, but actually it's a big deal. There are a lot of people out there that don't know that that's possible for them because they never see it reflected back, because people think that's important to tell. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing, it is easy to kind of push your own story down and your own feelings down as well, to be numb. And sometimes I think not similar to you at all. Both my parents had passed away by the time I was in my early 20s. So my mom passed away when I was quite young. And it's the kind of thing that also, because you're living through it, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Like, and I'm not saying that's what you should do or anything, but I think so many people do that. And that to me is where the power of writing the story comes, because sometimes you just need to kind of hear your own story for yourself. You know, like it needs to be just between you and the journal, you know?
Right.
And then that helps you to kind of process it enough that you can then go out there and talk about it. And that's something I wanted to ask you about your own book, because I think sometimes we do need to do that processing before we can share it with the world. I think, you know, all of us have read books or people have written, but it's very obvious that they haven't processed
Yeah.
the story and they're just sort of putting it out there. But I do think it's important that in order for you to tell the story in any way that you want, you have to be able to process it yourself first.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that process went with you writing your book.
So that was interesting too. As I was saying earlier, like my friend of mine was like, "Hey, just take 30 days and write." Mm-hmm. And so I did. And I thought that was the book. And I was like, okay, I kind of let everything out and this and, you know, and because he's also a writer, he was like, "Oh, this is good. You started. This is good." And I thought it was the book. I'm like, good. He was like, this is a good start, but we'll get back to it. And I was like, okay, I had a whole different name and everything. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to push it out. This was a process because it wasn't until 5 years later, I think, that I started this process of this book. And I was in a coaching program, which I guess God just kind of helped me in, because I was like, I'm not trying to be a business coach, but it came up and I took a retreat. And after this retreat, I was like, okay, no, I feel this unction to go ahead and take this coaching program. And I was like, well, and nothing else, I can learn more about business. Why not? So I took it and I met people. We had to practice coaching. So when we were in our little pod, I started talking about certain things in my story based on what other people were saying. And they were like, who knew you went through all of this? You're always smiling. You're always, whoa, this is amazing that you're still standing. How did you do that? And I was like, oh, well, let me talk about that. And so there was one young lady who I was talking to, and she said, you need to put this in a book because this is really good. It's really encouraging hearing what you went through and then how you're on the other side of that. And she said, even the fact, you know, your age and all of this, like you have so much positivity, even though you've gone through so much, people need to know how. She said, even I have gone through things, but I don't know how to leverage it. I don't know how to look at these pain points and see there's a lesson. And so I was like, okay, she said, I'm in a program that is, you know, that helps people write books and market their books. She's like, you should check it out. And so I did. And it was funny because it was a business professor from Georgetown who did this program for his business students. And then he, you know, brought it out to the public. So it was almost a 9-month program. So I'm like, okay, people ask me, how long did it take you to write your book? I was like, 5 years, 7 years, 9 months. I mean, because that was the full process. I started it from journals. I started it from expressing myself. And then I went to this program because somebody urged me to tell my story. And I was very private. I'm still very private, and I don't mind sharing it when it's relevant. I don't wear my, you know, paint on my sleeves. But if I'm talking to somebody and I'll be like, you know what, I went through this and this is what I learned and maybe it will help you. And people are like, you should share that. And so it got to the point where, okay, let me put this in the book. And let me just talk to people about lessons that I've learned because there are a lot of lessons that I learned from my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and all of that brought me to this place that even helped me to being able to cultivate what's going on in my life. And I didn't realize that until I paid attention. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember my uncle used to say this, or my aunt, I got this from my aunt. She's this way. Oh, that's where I get that from. And throughout my life, I've just done it or I've just thought it. But I'm like, taking time to really focus on how it could help other people really helped me realize how it helped me. And so that was the process of me writing it. There's a quote by Dr. Maya Angelou, because I still get to the point where, oh, I don't want people to think this. And if people know this about me, they may think differently or they may think I'm this. And there's a quote by Dr. Maya Angelou. It's not even about you. And so I actually have that on my screen. It's like, it ain't about you, honey, Dr. Maya Angelou. And it reminds me that I'm doing this to empower other people. because these are the lessons that empowered me. So it's called In the Absence of, Finding Confidence in Quiet Spaces of Noise, because I was a quiet person, but it was in those moments, all this stuff happening around me. It was in those moments that I got quiet, that I'm like, okay, God, I don't understand. And I can express myself, that I found the answer. And so it was like, even in the absence of my parents, even in the absence of the babies, even in the absence of my marriage, because I ended up getting a divorce after those 7 years, like it was so many things that happened. I'm still standing, I'm still breathing, and my story still matters. And I want people to be aware and realize within their own stories, you still matter and you still have a voice, and you can get back up out of that and express and help somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that. And I was going to ask you about the title, but you've already gone into it. And I do like that, because I think, as you so rightly pointed out, even in the absence of what people may think is what a life is made of, right?
Right.
That there's still the presence of so many memories, influences, and still support systems. You talk about one person you met encouraging you to do something else, and just, in the absence of those things, there was still the presence of a story and a life which could then be shared and empowering to others. Right. So I love that. As I said earlier, we were connected by a mutual friend, and she said to me that I need to ask you a little bit about the boardroom.
Oh.
Tell us about the boardroom. What is the boardroom for the listeners?
So this is a process of that I'm creating, I'm putting together under my coaching program. Researchers to help people to rise again out of whatever situation it can be. It could be a loss of a person. It could be a loss of a thing. It could be a loss of whatever, something, anything that causes you to lose a part of yourself. So it doesn't have to be a death. It could be any type of loss. A loss of a job could adjust anything that adjusts your state of being. And so there's this process that me and my friend, he's probably going to get me, but he introduced me to, and it has to do with the voices in your head, all the aspects of you. And so because I'm moving towards business, the boardroom made sense for us. We were like, okay, he's like, this is my mental boardroom because I am my business. So business people usually have a board of trustees, a board of people who help make decisions for the business. And if you think about the voices in your head are like the boardroom. And so when you have to make a decision, there's a lot of things that happen. So there's fear in your head, like, no, you can't do that. Then there's, maybe something your mom said when you were younger. Oh, well, you can only do this. You have to do this. Or your third grade teacher. There's all these aspects in your mind, these voices in your mind. And so what I'm putting together is how to have them as a meeting. Think about them at a table. And it could be whatever is comforting to you, because some people, like as writers, we be like, okay, the writer's room. Everybody has their place. It could be like a birthing room if I'm thinking about like I'm birthing something. So whatever it is, but for me, it's the boardroom because I think my focus is business. So if I have fear, if I have joy, if I have, all of the feelings that I have in my head, then maybe counsel from a friend or a mentor. What would they say? Everybody has a voice. Let them speak. Don't say fear has to go away, because maybe fear has something to say and it's useful, but don't let fear run the meeting. So you think about all the aspects, all the voices that's going on in your head, and I'm visual. So I'm like, I see a table, sit them down, look at where everybody's sitting, look at what they're saying, and then quiet them and say, okay, fear is really loud right now. You think you're running a meeting. No, I need you to move seat. You can stay here, doubt, but you can't talk right now. I heard what you have to say and I take it. Okay, now then here's a little happiness, or here's something my mom said. Maybe I need to let that run the meeting. So that's kind of the gist of it. And that's the first part. You think about who's in the room. Then you think about who needs to leave the room, because maybe I don't need fear right now. That helped me get to where I was, but I don't need you moving forward. I need you to leave the room. I'm not going to say you can't come back, because sometimes fear makes us think about something we don't think about. Instead of being just afraid, it's like, it's a warning. But in this aspect, maybe I don't need it. Or anger. Maybe I need to be angry about what the the thing is that we need to make a decision about. I need it, but I can't let you drive the meeting. Then who's the quiet one? There is usually a very quiet, somebody's whispering, or they're not saying anything. Pay attention to that person, because usually they have like what's very valuable, but because they don't scream at you, you ignore it. And sometimes that's the answer that you need. So it's kind of like that process to say, how do I quiet the voices in my room? And I just call it the boardroom because it gives a visual. And then there's a practice of, steps of how to make it easier to get to the decision that you need to make. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to make a decision. You need to do an action. That's usually what it is. When things are noisy in your mind, you're dealing with something that you have to make a choice and a decision to take an action. And that's the gist of the boardroom process.
Oh, I love that. And it really reminds me, I have this friend who, years ago, I remembered she talked about her ideas, in that way, almost like in a real tangible way. And she's like, I don't mind the people or the voices that are critical, because they tell me, they kind of plug the holes in my idea, right? So they'll remind you, okay, make sure you think about this, make sure you think about that. But she's like, I don't want to hear that first. First, I want to hear the person who's going to encourage me, or whatever the case may be. And so I think when you said that, I was getting a visual of that, because I think it's a good way of kind of orchestrating that environment, but, being able to kind of manage it the same way, or chair it the same way you chair a board meeting. So I love that.
Yeah.
What's been your proudest moment of this journey, or a proud moment? Because you probably had a few.
Wow. It's seeing the impact it's had on other people, how the book journey, me sharing with people and people reading it and coming back and saying, oh my goodness, thank you for sharing your story. It's opened me up to see the value in mine. That is the proudest moment for me. Like, for other people to see how they are important, how their stories matter, because this kind of saying that you never know if your story will help the person next to you take the leap that they need to move forward in life, or don't jump and end it all, because you never know. We're so focused on what's in mainstream, whose story, what celebrity, what, famous person, what they've done. But sometimes that doesn't resonate with the person. Like, they're them. But, we encounter people every day, and you never know what you've gone through will encourage somebody that's sitting next to you on a bus, or someone that at work. You just don't know what they're going through. You sharing something may be like, make them think, I thought I was the only one. Thank you, because I was ready to give up. And you never know that, like, that's happened. So me being vulnerable and opening up, and then hearing, like, I had the idea, like, okay, hopefully, perfectly, this will help somebody. But to actually hear people say thank you and see their tears, and, really open up conversation and say, can I talk to you? Because reading this has helped me to feel comfortable with even sharing my story with anyone, because they're alone, they're isolated, and they feel if I say something, then I can't go forward. It will stop me, or I'll break, or people won't like me. And it's just like learning the power, even in that vulnerability, for people to say that has been huge for me. And it touches my heart. Like, it makes me emotional thinking about it, because that's what I wanted to do. I really want to empower people, because in some ways I felt that was missing for me.
Yeah.
It's like like you said, we're conditioned to say this is bad. This is the way things are. But I'm kind of a disruptor, and I'm kind of like, well, that's one way.
Exactly.
But there's so many other ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that is why it's important, for us to sort of have to be those everyday storytellers, because, when I see that celebrity on TV, I might be like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't feel it. Like, whereas if I see, oh, this is somebody who I work with, or this is somebody I went to school with. When I published my first book, I had people that I didn't even remember from school, because I'm from a small island, and so everybody knows everybody. It's not everybody who knows everybody, but a lot who will know. You're very interconnected.
Yeah.
And so I had people reaching out to me like, oh my goodness, you know, it gave them permission to feel like they could share certain things. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think you would remember me from school or whatever, you know? So it's, I think it's still important, very important. Well, so you said your next thing is going to be this film, hopefully, maybe next year. I say hopefully, maybe, because I know sometimes whenever it's something I think to myself, I'm going to write this book and then something else pops up in the meantime. So, you know, creativity is a very fluid medium. We can't always predict it. What might you do differently with your next project? Anything you want to try that's different, you know, and this isn't necessarily something that went bad, but something that you might think, oh, I want to try this thing next time.
Because there's a boldness and a confidence in me now that wasn't there before. I've always been open to people. I like people. People give me energy, you know, like being around people, but I wasn't an initiator. I was kind of like, I didn't market myself. I didn't really talk about, like, if it came up, I'll say, oh, thank you. You know, it's this, and I minimize it. I'm learning not to minimize and to initiate. So even when, you know, I was asked to do this, I was like, so Shonda Rhimes is one of like my sheroes. Like, and she has a book called The Year of Yes. I love her.
Listen,
I love her
one of my favorite books. By the way, anybody listening to this think they can get Shonda on my podcast? You email me. I love that book.
I love her. She's on my lunch list. I have a lunch list and she's on it.
She's on mine too. She's on my dream guest list.
Yes, we're gonna believe that she's gonna be on here. She's gonna hear this and she's gonna be like, let's get on here. But I love the fact that she was like, one, she's from a little town outside of Chicago. So I was like, oh, she's from a suburb of Chicago, and she's telling us, and she's like taking over her medium. But when I read the book and I found out that she was like, I don't want to do interviews. I don't want to do this. I just want to play with the people in my head. And I just want to like write, you know, but I told myself I'm going to take the initiative and be intentional of like saying yes to whatever opportunity comes. So that's where I am. I started that. And what I've noticed is that opportunities are coming because I open myself up for that. And so for the next project, which actually is the program that I'm about to launch, which is the Resurgence program. But for next year for the film, and I'm bringing it up because I have a friend who's like, she read the script and she's like, what are you doing? Why are we sitting on this? We need this type of story because it's different than what, like we were talking about before. It's a different narrative of the negative family. Like father-daughter relationship in this aspect, because it's loosely based on some of my story and my writing partner story. Right. And it's based on a father-daughter relationship. And my relationship with my dad and his relationship with his daughter are a little bit different, but the way we intertwine them, it makes sense because we still had the same love. She was a daddy's girl. I was a daddy's girl. And so I like his life and my dad's life were different, but we still had the same love in what they taught us moving forward. And so it's loosely based on my father's story. I don't want to get too much into it, but like
that's fine.
In my journey. So because of the little bit of sharing it, I have with people and I let her read it as she's been in the theater, you know, and her husband are moving into like more media. She's like, we need to get this out. What do we need to do to get this out next year? So now I'm open to there's value here. Let me start talking about it. What do we need to do to actually make plans to do that? As far as the coaching, I'm pushing myself out there as well. To create this as a real business, because I do realize that there are people who are lost from loss and they don't understand how to rise above that. And so I've learned and I have some formatting of like how to do that. And I have some structure and I want to share that with people. And I've been doing it here and there, sprinkling, but now I'm like, okay, it's time to get that out. So what do I do different? Be bold about it. Initiate conversations, take those opportunities and believe in it so much that people believe in it because that's what I'm giving out. They're like, wait, I need to grab some of that belief because if she can do it, you know, I can too. So that's what I'm going to do different.
that I love that. And I like that as well because, you know, one of the things that I believe, you know, I think the environment that I grew up in, there's this very much of a feeling of like, you don't want to talk about your dreams in case, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I get it. But also I'm not interested in that either anymore. Like for me, it's like,
Right.
and I've found every time I've talked about the things that I'm passionate about, that are important to me, or projects that I want to bring, that like literally even this podcast, there's a, like, I can't really talk about it much now, but I will soon. There's I wanted to have it somehow on a bigger stage, and I kind of mentioned it to somebody, and they were like, actually, I know the person you need to talk to. Now,
It's
if I
awesome.
hadn't get it to them, right, or if I hadn't put it out there, then that opportunity would not be there. So as you said, the opportunities also will come when you start to put yourself out there for them.
I have a thing called the automatic door theory. And so I think I talk about it a little bit in the book, but it came to me some years ago, and I was like praying, like, okay, like, why aren't opportunities coming? I see other people, opportunities coming from other people. We talk about, like, I want doors to open. I want doors to open. And God was like, well, you do have to take a step. And so the automatic door theory came to me. It was like, okay, for, automatic doors, there's a pad that's in front of the door. There's a sensor.
Yeah.
And you have to step into the sensor
towards
for the door to open.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is like, God is, people pray like, oh God, I want this. And God's like, I'm waiting on you to take a step. Like, it's already there.
Yeah, it's already there. And also by you putting it out there, it tells people that, other people, like, okay, this is somebody that is ready for this opportunity that I have, right? It would be easy for me to say, I want an opportunity for this idea that I have in my head. And then, but it's different if I say, this is what I've done with the idea so far. Then they can say, okay, I see that you are willing to put an effort behind this thing. We can work together. And so I definitely agree with that for sure. The last thing I would like to say is, before we move into the next part of the conversation, I'd love you to tell the audience, tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon for you next, if people want to get involved.
Okay, so I am working on what I'm calling the resurgence experience. And as I stated earlier, I've come across people. So I went through a coaching program, and I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good at this. People are saying, like, you're good at coaching people because you listen and you pay attention to what they're saying, and you give insight for them to realize that the answer is already in them. And so I wanted a way to connect knack for storytelling, because I got pushed into teaching a writer's lab, which was another thing that just came to me. But what I realized is, like, oh, you're good at helping people realize their stories. At the same time, it's going through the loss. And as they want to move forward, how do I bridge those things to say, hey, there's story in your loss. There's story in you rising above. And also, I'm living this thing. So the Resurgence program is talking about how to take those things, how to find your strength within your loss, and how to leverage that to create legacy. Because a lot of times people get stuck and they don't have anything to offer and they don't have anything to leave. But we really want to leave a mark in the world. And sometimes it's not about having a bunch of money. You probably have that within what your experience is. And that, like I said earlier, that can impact somebody else to move forward. So that's what the program is. It's talking about being aware. It's talking about how to leverage your loss and how to turn those into lessons and into legacy. And I'm excited because I'm looking to launch the first part later on in the year. By December, I want to launch the full program because I'm excited and I'm ready for it. And I'm also coming out with an audiobook because people keep saying, we need to hear your voice with the words. So that'll be out before Christmas as well.
Oh, I love it. I will have some links in the show notes that you can then use to stay in touch with Danielle and hear about any projects or books or films or audiobooks or programs that she has coming out into the world. So last but not least, there's a new segment that I bring in. It's called the Joy 5, and it's 5 minutes and some rapid fire questions. All right. Okay. So I'm going to put my little timer on and let's get going. So what is bringing you joy right now?
Being here. This is amazing. And I'm not saying it because it's your program. It really is something that I needed. I needed to break out of my shell.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Something that you want to try just for fun.
Ooh, skydiving.
Skydiving. Literally, you're the second person who said that. And actually, I was editing the other episode this morning, and I was like, "What?" And now you're like the second person because I think we need to do a Writing Black Joy skydiving. So let's see
I
how
love it.
that worked out. What returns you to joy? Like if you're having you talk a lot about loss. And you talk a lot about resilience and overcoming. So what returns you back to joy, even in spite of the loss? I'm not saying that you put it on the shelf or whatever, but like what helps bring you back to joy?
Remembering that I'm breathing, that as long as I still have breath, I have a chance, and knowing that God made me for a purpose. And that purpose is to impact people. So if I'm still breathing, there's still a chance for me to impact somebody else. Brings me back.
I love that. So tell me then something that always makes you laugh.
Thinking of my father's laugh. My father's laugh made you laugh. Like he could tell the corniest dad joke ever. And he had this laugh and it would bring joy to people. It was just like, oh my God. Yeah.
I love that. All right. Something that you dread, but that always makes you feel good afterwards.
Speaking publicly.
Interesting. Like this podcast episode, perhaps.
Yes.
I love that. What are you dreaming about? Tell us about one of your small or big dreams for your next project, or what are you dreaming about in general?
Buying a house. That's my new one right now. Yeah.
That I love that. I love that. That is amazing. And what are your favorite ways to connect with people?
I like talking on the phone. I'm still like that old school phone person.
Picking up the phone.
I like hearing people's voices.
Yeah, no, I love that. And tell me what for you is the connection between creativity and joy?
Quick answer is words. There's so much power in words. So not just speaking them, but hearing them and hearing the words behind the words. What's the message behind what you're saying? So digging deep, like words are my superpower. Like I love words.
I love it. There we have it. Listen, this has been such an amazing conversation, Danielle. I've been so happy to have you on. Need to have you on again when that film drops.
Love it. Yes, ma'am. Let's do it. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure of mine as well. So thank you so much. Thank you to my listeners, and catch up with the next episode soon. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.